Okay, when it comes to collecting video games and gaming systems, I've always emphasized that you should broaden your definition of what a gaming system is. And a good example is how I included the Sega Pico as part of my collection, because it all gives you an example of what the programmers were thinking and what audiences they were trying to target, what succeeded and what failed. Okay, here's the Virtual Boy. This was a really cool system, but the only reason why it failed, if I'm not mistaken, is because it was released around 1994 when the 3DO was in full effect. So there was no way that this could compete against the 3DO. But it was still a fun system. Here's where the cartridges are. Right there. There's a little hookup right there. I mean, it couldn't make a valid handheld system because obviously it was too big. I mentioned that board games, regular board games such as Monopoly and Life, and all the great board games, Clue, the great makers such as Milton Bradley tried to go electronic in order to get a larger audience. So keep that in mind, that you began seeing board games, regular board games and stuff, being upgraded to, semi-electronic, which meant that they took the video game industry very seriously. They realized that video games were pretty much going to replace board games. Doesn't mean video games were better, it just means that video games were handier, easier to store. Now, this goes into the 21st century. They began selling a lot of units that could pretty much do one or two things. This is a Golden Tee Golf, which is a very fun system here. Very simple for its day, but point for the record that they came out with like the Q-Joy, which could play like 64 games, and all it was one pad with 64 games built in. And after that, it formulated an explosion of copycats. People began trying to capitalize on coming up with one thing that was a play-all game system, meaning this right here, you could plug it into your TV set and you were ready to go. You didn't need to buy anything else, okay? And even though it was pretty simple stuff, it was a very popular theme. I don't have my Namco with me. I could have shown you that. Here's another example, Video Smart. It's a very simple item. It's obviously a kid's toy, but if you look in the history of video games, you will see that, well into the 21st century, that VTech has gained a popular audience, so there is a market for it. And now for the big issue. For the record, I consider this to be a valid video game system, okay? Your Game Boy. Okay, so it wasn't really a game system, it only hooked up to your Super Nintendo. But this brought your Super Nintendo to life. It played Game Boy games. And I'm going to tell you something, I never cared for the Game Boy. I thought that it was ridiculous. You could barely even see anything. And it didn't emit its own light. But when you put this on the Super Nintendo, you could play games like Super Mario Land and Super Mario Land 2 for hours. And I know this is going to sound corny, but for me, this was probably the game of the year for 1996, Super Mario Land 2. I would have never thought that, But when I put this in, a lot of the Game Boy games that were horrible were brought to life on your big TV screen. And interestingly, other Game Boy games, you learned how the Game Boy system had a lot of shortcomings. For example, when you play games like Asteroid or Missile Command on your television set, the graphics were actually choppier than Atari. So you learn a lot about that too. But I'm just saying, when you're looking at video game systems, broaden your horizons. Okay? Here's the back of the video sports children's system. Okay, right here, the Pong systems eventually became very small. Okay, so this is its own compatible Pong system. So instead of having a big system like that, or like that, and then of course there were like the Telstar Classic that were humongous, this was all you needed right here. And these people, TV Scorecard from Radio Shack, took it even one step further, where this was the Player 1 joypad, this little cool little thing, a little bit like a telephone. Okay, and then the second player had even a smaller joypad. And I remember I've told you that this TV Scorecard has undergone many face changes. This is obviously the small model. This is how it looks next to a Super Game Boy. And here's the Super Nintendo. Obviously, the Super Game Boy went in like that. And then it looks something like this. Pretty simple, straightforward. Here's ColecoVision expansion module number 1. Now, I never noticed this before. This is the first time in my life. Obviously, I knew that they had an expansion module for Atari 2600 cartridges, so you put this in, and it could play Atari 2600 cartridges. Pretty cool looking item here. Okay. A little sleek and small. You can see how it looks next to, let me give you a better angle. You can see how this looks next to a Super Nintendo. This is very narrow, very short here. I'm trying to give you a good angle, it's not easy. Okay. But the one thing that I never noticed was that this was expansion module number 1. I know that I think they made 3 expansion modules. They made the steering wheel, and what the hell else did they make? They made some other expansion module, but does this suggest that this was their first? Did this come before the steering wheel? That shows you how much they respected Atari. And this was actually better functional than Atari, actually. This was very nice to use. Okay. You also probably remember that Coleco, and I've shown it on another video, Coleco also made a game system called the Gemini that played Atari cartridges. And to the best of my knowledge, it did not play ColecoVision cartridges. It was just for Atari 2600. Okay, this looks very similar to another Pong system. I've told you that they release Pong systems under different names. This is Lloyd's. Pretty average Pong system. It obviously has the shooting capabilities. It has there we are, moving target, pistol, rifle. There's a story about that that's important to tell in the future, about how back then they made the rifles look very real. They didn't look clowny like today's rifles. Some of them could pass off for being real. They were really nice to own. And don't quote me on this, but I think that they were actually made illegal. That you were no longer allowed to make toy guns like this look real. Okay? I'm not an expert on this. I'm just trying to convey whatever information I know. Nice reset button, serve. Okay, so you can tell that they made a lot of Pong systems throughout video game history. Now, in the video game collection and all, it's amazing how a major game system can be overlooked by me. I never knew that this existed. I've collected all. I had all the Atari Pongs, Super Pong, Ultra Pong. Atari made several Pong systems before the 2600. But I didn't know that they also made a video pinball system. I didn't know that until 2 decades later. So this was very interesting. I had to buy it to make sure that this was even real, you know. Okay, here it is. It's called the model C380. C-380. Okay. If you remember Atari Video Pinball on the 2600, it was horrible. And then Midnight Magic was incredible. So two extremes there. Midnight Magic could have been one of the greatest pinball games of all time, comparable to any pinball game today. And then there was David's Midnight Magic was on the Atari XE. That was, at first you didn't like it because you were expecting another Midnight Magic. Because this was a little harder than Midnight Magic on the 2600. But it was actually better, it was more addictive. And then they came up with copycat pinball games. Some of them were pornographic, such as Knobs and Knockers, and they had the same feel to it, the same interface as David's Midnight Magic. Now this is a really tiny system here, called the Verco. Once again, you'll see that Pong systems were getting very small. You can even read this. I can't read it. Damn. Ah, here we go. Got power, angle, 20 to 40 degrees, speed. Okay. Same stuff. These, look, were removable. Just shows you how popular Pong was. I mean, can you imagine that? Just all these Pong systems were made. There was one that I didn't buy, one of the neatest looking Pong systems ever, but the auction went up to like $250, and then because it was being sold from Britain, I would have had to pay another $50 shipping, plus take my chances that they weren't going to ever send it anyway. So I don't have all the Pong systems there, so it shows you just how much they made. Here's the Super Nintendo. Here's the, trying to show you just how small this unit is. See how low it is? It's very low. There's a good shot right there with my finger. Okay, so that just shows you how small it was. Okay, here's the Konica TV101-4. Looks exactly like other Pong systems. There are other Pong systems that were released with the same exact design. Okay, so obviously it makes you suspect that it was made by the same people under a different name or under a license or something to that effect. Or of course under going to a different country. Okay, so this one is in much better condition than the other one. So okay, if you remember the Telstar Alpha, I'm not sure, but the Telstar Alpha was perhaps the best known of the Telstar Pong systems. I might be wrong. I think it was even better received than the Telstar. Telstar Alpha looked exactly like this right here, only the joypads were attached to the system. I've already shown you this in a previous video. So if we take this out of the sun here, so I can give you an idea. This is the same exact thing as the Telstar Alpha, same exact shell, okay? The only difference is these were removable. But if you look up here, the Telstar Alpha was black, just like this, and it had the same hockey, tennis, handball, highlight, reset. Okay, so just shows you that they were scrambling to make new Pong systems always. And much to my surprise, when I went into research, I learned that they were making Pong systems well after the Atari 2600. I don't know what they were thinking, okay? Because when the Atari 2600 came out, not only could it play interchangeable cartridges and different kinds of games, but the graphics were smooth. And once again, when you tell that to people now, it's like, what? The Atari 2600 had smooth graphics? It sure did. In other words, you didn't recognize it as a computer chip. In contrast, if you played the Fairchild looked and felt like it was nothing more than a two-page program. Okay? So the Atari 2600 was a major advance. Now we get to the Telstar Colormatic. Okay? So this is the Telstar Colormatic. Trying to, it's just, oh shoot. The sunlight just drives me absolutely crazy. Okay? Every if I do a video for a few minutes, within a few minutes time, the sunlight changes. Okay, here's a good shot of the Colormatic. Okay, it's the same exact size as the Telstar Alpha and the Telstar Region. Same exact size, same exact shell. The only difference is this has a simulated wood grain appearance. You can see that right there. And of course, you can see that this goes in here. And it has a pretty cool looking joypad. Okay, so assumably after the Colormatic came the Colortron. Try to get a good shot of this. Here's the Colortron. Now, sometimes I've made the mistake of mixing up color, because I think that other system I had accidentally called the Colortron to several, like people were asking questions about games. I said, yeah, and after this they came out with the Colortron. I'm wrong, it was the Colormatic, okay? This is the Colortron, okay? The Telstar Colortron, a very small system. Now, I might be wrong, but if I'm not mistaken, after Coleco had made several Pong systems, this was their smallest unit. Okay? Let's do a size comparison. Okay? This is how it looks next to the Telstar Region. Very small. Notice how the paddles are attached to the system. Okay. This is how the system would look. This is the same exact system. This is how it looks from a different angle. Okay. Okay. And then finally on my list for today, I'm showing you the Ricochet system. Very interesting concept. It kind of mixes the big systems like this with the smaller systems. So it's big, but it has two separate joypads. So obviously player 1 would hold this and player 2 would hold this. So it was kind of like a mixture of the big and small. Very unusual. From the looks of the buttons, it looks foreign. And from the looks of the wire, I might be wrong. Okay, let's look at this. Ricochet hockey, tennis, racquetball. Okay, that's the button. Pro English, Pro Slam, manual slur, Ricochet, normal, speed, English, normal, pro, serve, manual, auto, racquetball, color port. And it gives you the option of the sound off, power off. Same thing here. Okay. And here's how this would look next to a Super Nintendo as far as giving you a perception of how big this is. Okay. And here's how Lloyd's would look. Excuse me. There's this. Here's Lloyd's. Okay. And finally, I'm going to save the Vectrex for the next video. Okay. The Vectrex is a classic example of something that certainly deserves to be considered a video game system. Obviously looks more like a TV than